Today I just want to show three of my Lego creations before I take them apart. They're all boats, but they're certainly all very different. To begin with, over here we have the white, sort of like a Coast Guard cutter in actuality. It's not extremely large, but you can tell it's all built to the scale of these grills right here being the windows. So if there were a human or a minifigure in this, minifigure would be about the height of half a full brick height. So when you think about it, this boat is actually quite large. We've got the propellers in the back, the white rating all around, and also some pieces here that kind of imitate what a lifeboat would look like from a large distance. We've got the prow at the front, the foghorn there, and the nondescript flag on top. And we've got some antennas and the exhaust ports, some lights, the radar in the back, of course, and then a multi-level deck here that kind of imitates the fact that there's at least 4 or 5 different levels in the superstructure on this thing. And then, of course, we have this very streamlined looking kind of shape, so it looks like it could handle a storm pretty well. That's the first one. This one took me probably 3 hours to do. Once I knew that I wanted it to be pretty much as uniform of a color scheme as possible, I just piled up all the white pieces and started putting them together. I think the first thing I had to figure out was the hole, of course. I didn't have as many white pieces as I wanted, so you can see I had to use some gray in there and a yellow piece. But for the most part, the entire ship is white, and I just used a little bit of blue to kind of accent it. And then the second ship we've got would be the tanker. And by this time I'd figured out I wanted to do single color scheme boats, so I collected all the yellow pieces to begin with, and then I figured out how long of a ship I could manage to make it. The first thing I actually built was the superstructure at the end. The thing that always amazes me about cargo ships is that the control tower has to be so far up in order to command a view of the entire ship. And so I tried making it look pretty realistic. Same scale as the last one. You can see that there's this bank of windows here that reaches from it actually reaches over the end of the ship. I couldn't make it too high, or else it would look unrealistic. But we have the radar, and then the radar domes, and then quite a complicated. Here we can see that it's riding so low in the water that you can't see the propellers whatsoever. But we do have quite an elaborate exhaust system for the motors, because it takes quite a lot of power to get this thing going. We've got a few micro-scale cranes here. This one probably is automatic. I don't know. It's tough to say. It's pretty short, even though the minifigures are only half a full stud high. The important thing is it can carry a large amount. This deck is completely solid, so there's no way you can open this one up. This crane over here, however, is a little bit smaller, and it's designed more for lifting small loads out. The prow of the ship is filled with pumps and all sorts of equipment. It took me probably 3 hours just working on the front alone. I worked on it on and off for the whole time because I didn't have quite enough streamlined pieces. So what I had to do for the yellow hull was kind of stagger things and figure out how in the world to hold this whole boat together. This is another solid deck, but it actually is just large pieces on their side, so it looks like a smooth deck. So that's using studs not on top. We've got an extra large gangplank, which in reality gangplanks would slide in, not fold up, but this is the best I had. Getting rid of all of these and and we can actually keep the crane on there for now. I designed this to slide back and forth, and it can be removed, this deck, showing that actually the inside of the ship is completely hollow. I designed it that way because obviously I didn't have enough yellow bricks to build a hole on the bottom of the boat. So if I carefully lift it up, which it holds together pretty well because of the solid construction, you can see that except at the bow where there's it's pretty thick, the rest of the ship is completely almost hollow. It gets a little more complicated near the end, but along here there's nothing. Anyway, so that's the second one. Some of the pieces, like this one here that just fell out, just kind of fit in because I was using so many odd pieces. There aren't enough studs to hold everything together. But I'd say that the final result is pretty striking. It really looks pretty spectacular. And then last but not least, this is the one that I've been working on for at least a couple weeks, on and off, of course. The last color I actually had a lot of was gray, and you can see I used a little bit of black on the bottom, on the front. And I said, what if I built an aircraft carrier / battleship? So I started right here. This was the first part I built with Kaiser built the microscale airplane, and I kind of used that, since it's about the right size, to construct the runway using those golden pieces just to add a little accent. And you can see I also constructed a microscale crane. So this crane is about the size you'd expect it to. These slopes, these 1 by 1 by 1 slopes, are really nice because they're the size of a human operator if there was one inside. And then I connected it onto the rest of the ship, and then I just sort of built on top, and it became this really complicated thing that actually turns out more steampunk rather than battleship. Over here we have another, it's supposed to be a helicopter landing pad, but instead we have another microscale jet plane. And then you'll notice that all over, on all the roofs and everything, we've got antennas. We've got an antenna there, 2 antennas actually. We've got more control equipment on here, and it's really just stuff everywhere. There's another small loading crane, and we got just a few flags, just a few colored flags, to liven things up a bit. You'll notice on the back, the propellers are again showing, and so is the main generator housing where the power is generated for the whole ship. The first thing I designed was this striking elevated landing pad, because you can kind of zoom right in through it and see the lifting mechanism, the elevators that connect, lift people up to different levels of the ship. Here I've got a small entrance designed to kind of usher people from the loading deck into one of the main towers. And over here you can see is one of their little houses. We've got, here's the first station on the elevated transport system, and it runs down with these little cranes here that are running along. It runs all the way down and connects into the main control tower right there, and then through that station it runs again. There's another of the little ones, and it continues on around here. Here's a better view of one of the elevated control. It's carrying a little load, so it's kind of like a crane system, and it ends at this station here. This is kind of a block of houses, so they've got some sloped roofs and a nice propeller. Also, we've got a windmill over here too, which I think the windmills kind of add a touch because it makes it feel a little more old-fashioned. But when you look at it, you realize how big the windmill must really be if the people are walking along like that bridge, for example. Each of those parts that are sticking out, those bricks, are actually supposed to represent decks, levels. And so here at the front we've got an oil can, which adds a nice steampunk touch, with an extra crane right here. If we zoom out a bit, we can see that the front of the ship is bristling with these guns. We've got a large number of them underneath the deck, and then we have quite a few all on the side. This is the first set of buildings you run across right here in the front, and then as you cross the bridge you come across the main control center, which again has those distinctive windows, which is what I built my scale around. And then there's some other more minor areas. There's the one of the main fuel and storage facilities down there on the first, or actually it's like the third deck up. There's a large hangar in here. You can't see well because it's dark, but that's the whole point. We've got some more buildings here. I really worked hard on designing all these bridges and overpasses, so it looks really complicated. There's this dark alley here, which would not be a place I would go at night. And there's lots of pipes and pipe works going everywhere. And it's one of the main things about steampunk is that there's lots of steam, so that's the need for smokestacks. You can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Lots and lots. So if I were to pick this up and show you what it looks like on the underside, you would probably be amazed that the whole thing, the superstructure, is probably, I'm probably not exaggerating when I say 10 times larger than the actual bottom. Okay, if from a distance, this thing is huge. I mean, we're talking an enormous amount of equipment and stuff on board. When you flip it over, only this long strip is actually touching the water, is actually resting in the water. So we've got this enormously high structure built on this very shallow hole. Obviously it doesn't go very fast. That's the need for the guns and the protective measures taken. Anyway, so there we have my 3 ships. We have this steampunk inspired battleship slash city, floating city, with this astounding array of details. And then we got this rather hard on the eyes yellow transport. And it has some details, but it's really pretty plain, which is actually adds a lot of detail because tankers usually are very nondescript, even though they usually don't come in bright yellow. And then, last but not least, we have, I think, still my best work, the white Coast Guard cutter. The way that the railings show up, even though they don't look like railings close up, but from a distance, it really does look like something you would see coming to the rescue or patrolling the international waters. And with actually, I think having all these individual pieces actually makes it look more like decks and pieces of metal welded on. So I think using more small pieces adds to the detail when you're designing a microscale object, and thus all the little tiny things like the binoculars I put on there for foghorns, and the flags, and all those intricate little pieces that are just stuck on there to make you imagine what they're really used for. You can see that here we've only got probably 1 or 2 lifeboats on this entire boat, whereas over here you can just count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then that's just on one side. There's 6 on the other side for a total of 12. So the difference between the different ships is quite striking. I think if I had to live on one, this one would be most interesting. But I suppose if I was the captain of a ship, I'd want the Coast Guard cutter. All right, have a wonderful day.